You are here on the Debrief with Debra Shushan. This is your place for podcasts and commentary related to all things on Israel, Palestine, the broader Middle East, Jewish Americans, U.S. foreign policy, and the fight for democracy against authoritarianism. I'm your host, Dr. Debra Shushan. I'm a senior fellow at Georgetown's Center for Jewish Civilization, and I'm a DC-based government affairs and policy expert. I am super excited here. Oh my goodness! Wow, do we have Japanese? Jason is putting some Japanese into the chat. I love it, Jason. Wow! Except you're writing it in English script, which really does nothing for me. So please do put that in there in hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Or I'm not interested, Jason. All right. Anyhow, I am super excited to be welcoming my amazing chuckling guests here on the debrief. Let me introduce them. You probably all know who they are already, but I have Rabbi Sandr Lawson. She is the executive director of Carolina Jews for Justice. She is also a Reconstructionist rabbi who was ordained at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. I'm a Philly native. And so I know RRC very well. It's right there in the Philly suburbs. I also have with me Dr. Stephanie Wilson. You will know her as a historian and the host of the popular podcast that you can find right here on Substack, Freedom Over Fascism. She is, as we like to say, right, Stephanie, a fellow badass, overeducated, anti-fascist Jewish mother of a certain age. Am I right, Stephanie?
That is absolutely
Absolutely.
the way to do it.
Absolutely. All right. It is so great to have you here, Rabbi Sandr and Stephanie. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be
looking
here.
forward to this. Exciting. Last time we talked to you, I had to cancel because of a rabbinic thing, but glad to be here today.
Awesome. All right. So there's so much to talk about, guys. Obviously, so much has been happening in our country, in our world. And I have some topics that I am looking forward to putting out to this esteemed group of badass Jewish women for some discussion. Let me say that we will do our best in whatever language we understand to be looking at your comments in the chat. And if there are particular things that you want us to talk about or comments that you want us to address, we'll do our best. I can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but do feel free to hit us up there in the chat. Here's where I'd like to start for today. As some folks who are in our audience will know, today's a Jewish holiday. It's the holiday of Shavuot. It is not one of the best known Jewish holidays, but it is nonetheless a very significant and important one. And I'm going to just say a few words, even though I'm not qualified. We will certainly kick it over to Rabbi Sandr in just a moment. But just for context, for folks who don't know what Shavuot is about, it is a celebration of Matan Torah, which means the giving of Torah to the Jewish people. In the words of another one of my favorite rabbis, who is a debrief alum, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, she refers to it as the revelation of the truth of the Holy One's presence in the human sphere. Rabbi Sandr, you just wrote a beautiful piece that you put on Substack on the subject of revelation. And I want to toss it to you in just a second. On Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth, which is a really interesting story. It is about, and Rabbi Sandr will talk more about this, but it's a story about migrants welcoming the stranger, acts of kindness, lots of things that are very, timeless, but also significant to us today. Rabbi Sandr, how are you thinking about Shavuot in America in 2026?
Yeah, so what I will say first for the lighthearted part, if you can, if you're not lactose intolerant, we eat dairy. in this day, which is pretty cool. You know, one of the things, Shavuot or Shavuos for my Ashken normative friends, you know, I always think about the fact that on this day, when we receive the Torah, not just the Ten Commandments, but we see the entire Torah, and some of our rabbis said we even received the oral Torah at that time period. We, for our Jews who like to study text or read text, we read the book of Yitro and we read the book of Ruth. Or we read the Torah portion of Yitro and read the book of Ruth, which is fascinating to me because Yitro was not an Israelite. He was Moses' father-in-law. He was a Mennonite priest or something like that. And today we would say he was a non-Jew. So we have an entire Torah portion dedicated to somebody who's not, in our modern language, not Jewish. And we read the entire book of Ruth, like, you know, where this woman, you could call her an immigrant in today's language, and we use that as a model for accepting outsiders. We use that as a model for conversion. And so we read these two books from about that are outsiders. And you know, the rabbis are of our tradition. When I was writing the piece the other day, I had my own question, like, why those two? Why are those the two books that we read? And I think that's very fascinating, telling, especially in our Jewish communities where sometimes we question outsiders, and in our American context, because we do share text with Christians, you know, in our American context, the way we are treating outsiders, and my opinion is not very Jewish or Christian. And the other thing too, I want to point out is that when we left Mitzrayim, we left Egypt, the narrow place, the place of constriction, the place that caused us pain, the place that enslaved us. That's all those ways that you can translate that. We were not Jewish. We were a bunch of different people who left Mitzrayim, followed Moshe Rabbeinu, and followed Moses in the desert. And when we received the Torah, when we received revelation, that is the moment that we became one people. Mm. And centuries later, Christianity, so I could put a period there, but centuries later, Christianity came along and made us a religion. And we don't fit neatly into like a round hole, a square peg. A definition of religion, because you can be part of the people and not practice their religion, meaning you could be an atheist, but you can't practice the religion and not be part of the people. So that's just an addition to that, and I'll close with that. But I love Shavuot, and also for the geeky people, this is the time you study in 24 hours. It's a whole study thing. So for people who follow me, I have pieces that I want to finish because today's holiday butts up against Memorial Day, so I have a lot of time to finish 3 pieces I've been working on. So they might come back to it. Okay, I'm dead. I'll stop. Let's get on the other bit.
Wonderful.
One of the things that I find, so it's also a harvest holiday, like,
yeah,
you know, as everything has multiple purposes. Mm-hmm. And one of the big holidays where in the ancient world, it was a pilgrimage holiday where people would come to the temple and make sacrifices, which we, you know, don't do now. And we've shifted to rabbinic Judaism. And you had a really great piece on Pharisees, actually, Rabbi Sandr. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I find most fascinating and lovely about Judaism is it is said that it wasn't just Moses and the people who were there who received the word of God. It's however we think of God. It's every single one of us. Absolutely. We're there, like a bending of space and time. And not only were we all there for the revelation, but we were all slaves in Egypt or in Mitzrayim, if we want to, you know, and we were all freed. And the other thing is one of the biggest parts, the most important piece that I find is that we're taught that everyone is made in the image of God, Elohim. And some Christians say, well, if you're not perfect, then you're not in the image of God, and therefore you're wrong. But I think we, at least as liberal Jews, see it as God is everything and everybody. So whoever and whatever you are, it is by definition in the image of God, and therefore worth um, including, embracing, uh, and all those things. So that's one of the differences between Judaism and Christianity that I find most interesting, and this idea that we were all slaves. We all received the revelation, which I think ties into why many American Jews are so committed to civil rights. Okay, brought that around.
Yeah, and
I want to say one more thing too. I see Daniel, and I've talked to Daniel. I believe I've talked to him before. I will say, I'm not going to read it because kind of I did offensive, but I will say what Daniel wrote in chat is an interpretation of conversion within rabbinic Judaism, but it's not the only one. It's by far the only one. So I believe for many of our siblings who were raised a particular way, usually Orthodoxy or within the Haredi movement or something like that, that is a real interpretation of conversion, but it is not how many other streams of Judaism, or even the entire Talmud itself, sees conversion. So if people want to read it, they can. But I just wanted to add that into that, so that comment doesn't just land. And this is no shade on Daniel, but it is an interpretation, but it is not the only one.
Well, I think, just if you don't mind, one thing about that is that everything in Judaism is multiple interpretations. And the whole idea is that we're all basically arguing with each other about what is the truth and how do we implement it. Whereas, some other religions are told this is the truth, this is how you have to do things. And for us, like, everything's up for debate. My mentor once said, when my kid was really young, and he's texting me right now because he's watching, that you don't get what you deserve. She tells her kids, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it, a very Jewish way of looking at it, because everything is under discussion, always.
And there's also, I know you could all think on your work, but I also want to say 2 years ago, and I got to go back and find it because I was writing something. This was like maybe 5 years ago. And there is a text in the Talmud where some of the rabbis were very bothered about Yitro and Shavuot, and sort of tried to retroactively convert him to Judaism. Convert him, which is another religion does that. We don't. And I think that's also just interesting that I do remember that. And there was this whole thing about the rabbis just tried to convert him after he died. So anyway, I have to go find the text again.
All right. So wait, this is my opportunity to ask a rabbi a question that's been on my mind for a long time. But something that you just said prompted this. So now, I am not an expert in world religions, far, far from it. That is not my bailiwick. But it always seemed to me, at least compared to the other monotheistic, dominant monotheistic religions that have far greater membership than we have, Christianity and Islam, it's very interesting that Judaism is not a religion that proselytizes,
right,
whereas Christianity and Islam explicitly are. I always wondered why that was the case. Now, actually, I should say, Rabbi Sandr, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that proselytizing among other Jews is fine, which is why you'll see like ultra-Orthodox with getting secular Jews to like wrap tefillin and all of that to try to get them to be more religious. So there is that. But other than that, like, we don't proselytize to non-Jews. In some ways, potentially, you might say to our detriment, because that has something to do with us being so much smaller than other religious groups. Why don't we?
So it was interesting because the other day this came up on Threads. Somebody asked me, or actually didn't ask me, they just put it out on the ecosystem. Why don't Jews proselytize? And people, I mean, my response is like, because we just don't do that. But historically, we did. There was a point in time in history, centuries ago, like you'd have to go way back in time when we did. And the short answer that I've always been taught is that we were killed for it. We stopped doing it because some king, some ruler said, if you continue to do that, you will die. So it became part of our rules, basically, to not do that. And it has been interpreted in a variety of ways. From like, I remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, many synagogues didn't even want to put ads in papers about services. And it wasn't about anti-Semitism. I'm sure that was part of it, but mainly because we don't proselytize. We don't, but we do have a lot to offer. And one of the cool things about the internet, when rabbis and other Jewish folks started putting stuff on the internet, the idea was to appeal to Jews. But these videos, particularly the ones on YouTube, live on and live on. And many people who found meaning in them were not Jewish when they discovered them. And that has been a pathway for some to find Judaism and ultimately convert or throw their lot in the Jewish people, even though the initial reason for those videos was not to proselytize. We don't proselytize because we were killed for it.
Yeah. I see a couple of questions in the chat. Other folks are sort of taking the opportunity that I just did, like ask a rabbi stuff.
We can do it on the
hey,
podcast.
why not? Let's run with this. I'm going to take 2 questions for Rabbi Sandra that I see in the chat. And then we're going to move on to talk about other things. But 2 questions. All right, Rabbi Sandra, I'm going to rapid fire put them to you. Question number 1. I'm not Jewish. What is a rabbi? All right, so let's start with that. Cool.
Okay, so keep in mind, I'm going to try to
ask you. I'm going to put 2 questions out there. So, all right, what is a rabbi? All right, second question: B'Tselem Elohim. We're all created in the image of God. So, how could it be that some Jews hate on folks who are, say, LGBTQ or different in some sort of way from them, if the central tenet is we're all created in the image of God? So those are 2
questions. So I hope I get to all of it because I didn't write it down. So I'll just start with the last one because that's where my brain was. So with in my opinion, and other folks I've talked to across the spectrum, even Orthodox folks and some off the road, Haredi folks, the Torah, Talmud, our books are not actually homophobic. I think the interpretation of them has created homophobia and how people interpret them. So one of the things I'm doing today is I'm just posting Torah text on Threads and Blue Sky. And somebody questioned me about the Genesis text where it says God created humankind, because the word is Adam, created humankind, and them, male and female. And so I wrote the person back. They said that was, that text is used to harm trans people. And I said, I hear you. And in Hebrew is way more complex. We need to look at the word them, and we need to look at the word humankind. And the translation of it became a binary, which in my opinion was weaponized by Christianity to harm other folks. So homophobia is a mankind thing, it's a humankind thing. It is something that biases that people have. You can say that the command to be fruitful and multiply might play into that. But there are lots of texts in the Torah and the Talmud that are incredibly supportive of LGBTQ people. And part of the reasons I think that those haven't come to the forefront is because for a long time, our text, you could say, were written by men and translated by men. And as more people started to look at these texts, they started to unfold other things. So in the 80s and 90s, when more women were being ordained as clergy or getting Jewish scholarship and text, they started lifting up these other texts. And then queer people came along who benefited from the feminist movement, did the same thing. And now we have Black and brown Jews looking at texts. And we're actually getting a fuller picture of our history by the diversity of people that are looking at the text. So I'll say that. And what was the other part? What's a rabbi?
Rabbi?
So it's interesting because before the destruction of the Second Temple, so around 70 CE, the temple was destroyed, and Judaism ceased being a sacrificial religion. My understanding is all religions at that time were had sacrifices, and so that's how we practiced our tradition. We sacrificed. When you read the when you read the Torah, it talks about sacrificing, and there's lots of interesting articles in that. But um, when I'm trying to bear it, when we lost our temple, um, you know, and this is very shorthanded, and I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm trying to keep a sense of the time. You could say that some people were like, I'm just going to wait on the third temple. You could say some people were like, what do we do? Well, maybe I'll join something else, or they just gave up. And there was another group of people, the Pharisees, who had already started doing something else. And out of that, rabbinic Judaism was born. So rabbi, can mean several things. It can mean many. It can mean the root of the word can be many. It could also mean teacher. And so rabbis, in my opinion, are the carriers of this thousands of years tradition, so that I can come on this podcast and talk about it in a very short period of time because I have all the knowledge in my head. You can say we're like priests, but we're not, because we can get married, we can't have sex, we can have sex, we can do all those things. And we're also not like hierarchy. Like the things that I do as a rabbi, lay people can do them too. I just have years of education in my head where I can talk about these things. So a rabbi is also a Jewish leader, a teacher. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Excellent.
Mhm.
And I think, the distinction that you bring up between, most relevant between, let's say, Judaism and Catholicism, which is very hierarchical. Obviously, you've got the Pope. In Judaism, you don't have that. And so there are rabbis of all, we have different streams.
Yeah.
We've got lots of different flavors of rabbis. And you can find someone who, who matches your kind of form of Judaism that is meaningful to you. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's talk a little bit about politics here. We're going to shift gears a little bit. Obviously, super important stuff that is happening in our country and the world. And I want to start with something that you, Rabbi Sandr, have been really outspoken about. Stephanie, obviously, we've been following it very carefully. And this is the Calais Supreme Court decision of a couple of weeks ago that basically gutted what still remained of the Voting Rights Act. Um, and, this one way that folks have been talking about this is as a part of a broader movement, what has even been termed a deconstruction movement, which is aimed at rolling back all of the hard fought progress of the civil rights movement and taking us back to basically the era before that, which was Jim Crow, right? Um, Rabbi Sandra, as a Black Jewish person, as a head of a social justice Jewish organization, how are you processing all of this? And I guess the other question I want to ask you is, how should Jews be processing this? How should we be acting in this time?
That is, so in many ways, and this is my answer today, in many ways, I remember being in my late 20s and early 30s where people were sounding the alarm. They were really concerned about the Voting Rights Act. So just to be clear, I'm 56 years old. So that is, that was a while ago. And I was like in my late 20s, early 30s. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why are people so worried about it? And here we are, all those arguments are true because they knew what I didn't know at the time, that rights like this can be taken away. And what I will say, and I really curious about what Stephanie says, because I think Stephanie's more of an expert in this. I said that and I lost my point. But what I think the Jewish community, any marginalized group of folks that are not cisgendered white males, if you think this is only going to happen to Black people, you need a wake up call. You need a real wake up call. And I have talked to many privileged white men recently who just assume that once you have the right, it doesn't get taken away. And now they're looking at their families, their children, these are gay men, and they are terrified, and they don't have the resilience, they don't have the ancestral knowledge to deal with it. And this is when, and I'm not trying to be funny, this is when you really need to listen to Black people, because we know what it's like to be in a system that will give you rights, and then take your rights away. And even if we don't understand it, I think it's like built into our DNA. So for Jews who are really worried about anti-Semitism in particular, we need to start working with other marginalized folks. I understand the trauma and wanting to isolate yourself. I get it, but that's not going to help us. It's not going to help. We are much better off by organizing and working with other folks to keep the rights that we have and get the other ones back and to go forward. And I'm not interested in going backwards to whatever our democracy was before that, because clearly it was based on a bunch of norms that some man could just come along and be like, I'm not doing that. And everybody's like, okay with it. I'm so confused. And I don't think that our forefathers or whatever thought that Trump was possible, but clearly the Trump people did. And, we need to be working with other folks. So I'll just end that.
Yeah. Stephanie, what would you say?
I would say that I agree with everything that Rabbi Sandr just said, but also just as a subtlety here is we need to be listening to Black folks. Mm-hmm. And also we need to learn from Black folks who have been organizing and organizing and organizing and organizing for a very long time and have, kind of taken a back seat for a while because they were more in visible danger. I think we're all in some degree of danger right now. But the idea that we're different in some way than Black people, than immigrants, than any other than Muslims, I think is a very faulty view, because what the powerful have always done is divide and conquer. And by that, they don't mean divide the forces to conquer from multiple sides. They mean divide the people, yes, so that they can conquer more easily. And so I think that we have to remember the fact that if groups, individuals come together in solidarity, we get a lot farther and we make a lot more difference than if we try to go it alone and fight with each other along the way.
And I also want to say too, I remember when I was, it might have been my first year of college, or maybe it was high school, where I learned how I can't remember the name for it, but Black folks were used to break when white workers would go on strikes. And then, Black folks who'd come from the South to the North, they were hired in these factories, which pissed off lower working class white folks. And then the white folks came back and the Black folks lost their jobs again. Our society has told many white folks a lie, that as long as you no matter how poor you are always better off than a Black person. And right now, people are saying that that's not true, because Black women, I've seen studies, I haven't gone a deep dive in, and that says Black women were educated than many white folks, or majority white folks, I don't know. But there are successful Black people, and some white poor folks are like, what is wrong? I remember when I was 25, my first real car that I got because I wanted and I had money was bright red Jeep Wrangler, and I thought I had a breakup. I just wanted to feel better about myself. It was what you call retail shopping. I love that. I love that Jeep. I had the top down. And I still remember to this day, I was in the parking lot of Kroger. I was 28, something. And this guy says to me, he's a white dude, and he's like mad at me because I have this car. Like, how do you afford this car? How do you have this car and I don't? I'm just looking at him like he's nuts. And clear, and that was like, that's an example of some white dude being pissed off that I have things that I have, worked my butt off. But like I said, I think our white folks have been sold a lie that they are better, no matter how bad their life is, it's still better than a Black person's life. And that's not playing out. And I hope that more and more people don't have amnesia this time and vote for what I would consider to be their interest.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to put a fine point on that, in terms of the MAGA coalition, white folks who are struggling in the affordability crisis, and at the same time, though, are willing, are still hardcore standing behind Trump and MAGA because of this promise of supremacy. Right.
Did you guys hear the story? It was a clip. It was on CNN, and CNN anchor was reading a clip from NPR where this guy calls in, and they support Trump no matter what, but they don't have money. They are fasting to save money, and he supports Trump no matter what. And I was just like, what universe is this? Like, and he's like trying to say that there's like health benefits to fasting. There probably are, but you shouldn't be doing it because you don't have money.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's actually called starvation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, indeed. So bringing it back to Jews for a moment, since we're having a Jewish conversation here, um, in terms of where Jews fit into all of this and the fight for voting rights, I wonder if Jews are maybe less engaged than folks like us would want to see our Jewish community being. Because there are some Jews within our community who are so laser focused on anti-Semitism and what they see as rising anti-Semitism, in many cases connected with Israel Palestine, and we're going to actually get onto Israel Palestine in a moment, so we'll talk about that. But also this feeling of that some, not everyone, has of the Jewish community being in some way abandoned in our moment of need by other groups. And so basically, like, we just have to focus on our own thing. We just have to focus on anti-Semitism and keeping our community safe. And, maybe we still care about voting rights and all of that, but we have other things that we need to focus on right now. We gotta, I don't know, let's talk about maybe like Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of ADL, who basically, ADL has abandoned its broader civil rights mission with the idea that after October 7th, we've got to put our own gas mask on first, and everybody else can kind of fend for themselves because we got to take care of ourselves first. How do you guys respond to that?
So I think, the gas, like, I do think you should put your own gas mask on first. So you do need to, there is some real thing there, taking care of your own people. And at the same time, you shouldn't be blind. So one of the things that I think many of my Jewish colleagues can learn, my white Jewish colleagues can learn from Black and brown folks, is that I've always understood that racism never went away. I've always understood that racism can turn its head in multiple ways at any time, any shape, any way, whatever. It's raised by Black parents. That was, even though it wasn't like, I was raised in a happy home, but it wasn't like, it wasn't a fearful thing. It was a reality thing. And I think that because of immigration and assimilation, so Jews that immigrated from immigrated from Europe, wanted to assimilate, really wanted to assimilate in the same way that other groups immigrated from Europe during in our history. And so Jews who are white or who benefit from white skin or white privilege, that whiteness is provisional. And so we can be taken away at any time. But I think that's something that people need to understand. And at the same time, if you've spent your whole life not talking about anti-Semitism, as a Jewish person, not talking about anti-Semitism, well, if you've spent your life in progressive spaces and not making real relationships with folks, which means that you haven't really explained that Judaism is important to me. I'm just, you're just there sort of as a white savior to help other folks, or you're just there to help other folks with their issues. If you haven't built real relationships with people, talking about your own Judaism, or even you may not even care about Israel, but we're all of us on this call right now are only so many steps away from. We either have family or friends or loved ones in the state of it. If you haven't expressed that, and people don't know your connection to Israel, I don't even know much about Judaism. And because we live in a society right now that likes to dehumanize people, there's a lot of dehumanizing language in left spaces related to Jews and Israel. Building relationships with people will go a long way to help people to understand. Now, I'm not trying to say that people need to put themselves in harm's way, but I would rather hang out with progressive folks than far right-wing ideology, largely because right-wing anti-Semitism is absolutely core to the belief of right-wing extremists. Left-wing extremist folks who can be dangerous, I'm not trying to say they're not, it is not core to their belief. It is not core. And often anti-Semitism, when it does show up, can be corrected with education and relationships. And that's important. So hiding, not engaging other folks is not going to help us. And at the same time, we need to do a better job of educating our young folks about anti-Semitism and how to function in American society. And I'm not trying to say scare our young people, but we need to be honest about how the history of anti-Semitism and how it functions, and also how anti-Semitism has evolved. When anti-Semitism first came to this country, it was completely connected to religion. Basically, Jews killed Jesus. Now, today, some anti-Semitism is completely separated from religion, particularly around Israel, but not always. But it doesn't have to be connected to a religious ideology anymore.
Yeah. So, Stephen, is there anything you wanted to note on that? Or if not, we can switch gears to the next topic. So up to you.
I think Rabbi Sandra said it all. So let's move on.
So here's the next thing that I was going to raise, and I promise I'm mentioning this so that those of you who really want to hear about this topic will know that it's coming. We're going to talk about the Nick Kristof piece, the underlying facts, and the reaction to it. But I'm going to put a pin in it for a little bit. We're going to come back to it. I think the natural segue is another topic I wanted to talk about that I'll raise now, which is there was an attack recently. I've lost all track of time. Was it this week or last week? Who knows anymore? There was a horrific, deadly attack on the Islamic Center of San Diego. 3 people were killed. They heroically saved more folks from being killed. There's a school in the Islamic Center. There were 140 children that were present in the mosque whose lives, thank God, were saved. And we know, thanks to the reporting that's taken place in recent days, although I think, sadly, I would say, and I would say with concern, that this has not gotten the kind of front page coverage that it deserves. But we know that the 2 perpetrators, who were teenage boys and had been radicalized by what is essentially a global white supremacist movement on the internet, left behind a 75-page manifesto in which they had expressed, of course, hatred against Muslims. I say of course because they attacked a mosque. So in that document, there was plenty of Islamophobia. But surprise, surprise, there was also anti Semitism, great replacement theory, which is the belief that Jews are trying to replace white people in the United States and, perpetrating this great evil against the white Christian majority. So you have anti Semitism. You have in this manifesto the expression of the belief that Black people are genetically inferior. There's plenty of misogyny. Women are responsible for all of the ills of society. There's also homophobia, plenty of anti-trans sentiment. Surprise, surprise, it's all packed in there, right? Um, and so, I've tried to be out there a little bit. I made a video right after this happened, trying to express solidarity and the importance of Jews out there standing up for Muslims, and also making the point that while these guys decided to shoot up a mosque, it could have been just as easily a synagogue. Um, and, we would hope for solidarity of other folks with us, and we need to be out there with them, even though there are some tensions, right, between Jews and Muslims in the United States today, obviously. Uh, but I think there's a tremendous importance for solidarity. Let me throw it out to you guys. Who wants to get in? How are you thinking about this?
Well, first of all, it just enhances the point that we are all, that our fates are all intertwined, and that we're not free of hatred as any individual group. Like, it's all tied together. One of the things that I did see that I thought was really important was that Jewish communities all over the United States expressed horror. And actually, in San Diego, there's an interfaith group where a bunch of clergy work together, and the Jewish community in San Diego was very supportive of the mosque. But I think, just as Rabbi Sandr was saying before, there's this false idea that we're all somehow different. We've been told that the color of skin matters, or your religion matters, or your background, or who you love, or what gender or no gender you identify with, that somehow that makes us different. And kind of goes a little bit back to that original piece of our conversation. We were talking about how, everybody is born in the image of God, which means that God is all of these other things. I mean, God is Black. God is, God is trans. God is multi-gendered. God, and even in Jewish theology, there's multiple genders, and this whole idea that God is like so multifaceted, and that includes a whole bunch of genders. But the idea that we are somehow different, or somehow safe, or somehow more unsafe, I think is dangerous, because we really need to be working with the other minorities, or if not minority, then marginalized communities, because it's, we're not, this is the easy way to say it, we're not free until we're all free. But we're also all under attack, while even one of us is under attack. No, that's what I have to say.
Yeah. Rabbi Sandr, I know you earlier in your career, you spent some time working for ADL, And sorry, we're bringing up ADL again. That Marcia had said in the chat it was too early in the morning to talk about the stream, but I'm sorry, Marcia. But in your role years ago, working for ADL, you were very engaged in tracking extreme, right? Not just anti-Semitic extremism, but
Yeah.
extremism more broadly. What did you learn during that time doing that research about how this hatred, this extremism, often manifests itself here in our American context?
Yeah, so part of what my job was to understand extremist ideology, both left and right, not to try to explain it, but just to understand
Yep.
the belly of the beast or whatever. And and this was a time ago. So not my job anymore. But what's interesting to me is that I think one of the things that ADL understood and Jewish historians understood is that for right-wing ideology, and I mentioned this earlier, for right-wing extremists, anti-Semitism is at the core. It's like the base of all the other hatred. So if you combat other hatred, you're also helping Jews. And the sad thing about the ADL right now is we are losing our institutional memory as Jews of how to respond to this moment. So all the things, like for example, the immigration stuff, the ICE and CBP just kidnapping people. Um, I believe in its previous iteration, the ADL would have been the lead voice of don't do that. Like that's wrong. America's Greece, like at the White House, whatever. And for some reason, that is not happening. So we don't have anything to respond to this moment. And we don't have a lead organization. I mean, there are organizations responding, don't get me wrong, but we don't, like, the ADL would have taken the lead and we would have followed. And I think we would be better off right now. I do believe this as a society if that happened. And so also, I don't know if the ADL responded to what happened in San Diego. I hope they did. I really hope they did. Because that is the right thing to do. And all the rabbis here in North Carolina that I've seen so far, the rabbis that I've seen so far have responded publicly because we all understand that today it's a mosque, tomorrow it's a synagogue, or the next day it's a black church. And all folks who practice religion should be overly concerned right now with the violence that's happening in synagogues. I also want to say too that um, this reminds me of Columbine. I mean, it really does. These young folks, and I don't understand it. I don't know if we have um, a, 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 a masculine issue, like how I don't understand. It's not my area of expertise, but hate. If when, people who hate so that much, it only winds up ruining their own lives. Like it does. I mean, they can't hurt other people. But I watched this video earlier by somebody on Substack, and it was kind of funny. But this dude was playing the cello and put bacon on his shirt so that it was trying to offend Muslims. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that got hurt is that nice shirt he was wearing. Like what? Like it does. Hatred is a disease. It doesn't make any sense, and that's why understanding ideology is so important. But to have that level of hate based on made up stuff, it's just sad. And I think that we as a society are not responding the way a society should. Because I don't think Columbine was the first high school that happened to, but it was like the major one.
Yeah.
And there have been so many more after that. And we're not dealing with it correctly. And I think we are looking at I know I'm getting off topic. We are looking at our Second Amendment wrong. Like, I have fired all kinds of weapons in my professional career when I was in the military, and my dad taught me how to shoot. I don't personally own guns right now, so I'm not trying to take people's guns away. But we need to put some people who are smart in a room to figure out how we handle this and stop playing politics around taking people's guns away. Like, you could keep your guns, but let's there's got to be a better solution, because when young folks could just go to a mosque and try to murder people or go to a school we are failing. This is not how we are supposed to be. And the sad thing is that people see it's starting to become normalized, which is crazy. Because you said there wasn't a lot of news attention on it. And that's because I think it is just sadly so normal. And it's not supposed to be. Like, wake up, people. This is not how society is supposed to be.
Ooh, absolutely. I mean, let me just I'll just throw in a few additional points. On guns. Let's just, one thing I would mention in this specific case, how did these 17 and 18-year-old boys, how did they get the guns? Turns out one of their parents had an arsenal of weapons at home that were not, locked down. And so, I mean, that is a key piece of this. And we know from polling that, I mean, there aren't that many things that we as Americans across the board agree on, but a strong majority of Americans at least agree on some basic measures of gun control. Personally, I favor more those, low-hanging fruit measures of gun control. But this gets to the question of money and politics. Right? There are very strong lobbies, moneyed interests, the NRA, et cetera, that have made sure that we don't have legislation that a majority of Americans would approve of. So those are a couple things I'd throw in there. I mean, the internet obviously plays a part in this in terms of radicalization. I mean, that's how these two boys apparently, according to what we know right now, were radicalized. And the other piece that we just have to put out there, I think, this is not happening in a vacuum. Obviously, it's happening in a situation where the kinds of ideologies that these boys were indoctrinated into are being represented and spouted at the highest levels in our country, right? Um, I mean, all the way up to the White House, including in Congress, for members of Congress who say the most appalling things about Muslims specifically. And if it's Islamophobia, you can get away with it. And I am very sorry to say that some of those elected officials who have said these things are Jewish. And that is an instance in which it is incumbent upon us as the Jewish community to speak out strongly and condemn. I'm not even going to name names because I don't want to give these folks the attention and oxygen that they crave. But I think it's really important that we as a Jewish community make crystal clear that these kinds of folks are not representing us and they are not who the majority, right, of our community is.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a slight problem right now is that a lot of the bad guys in the news are Jewish, and it breaks my heart. And I want to be like, no, we don't claim them. They're not, like they're excommunicated. But
By the way, just be there.
But yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Well, I mean, Orthodox folks there is a method for where they can strip smicha away from rabbis, but that is not true for other streams. And we don't kick Jews. I believe me. I have questions about Stephen Miller. I know I shouldn't say his name, but
right. The Stephen Millers, the Jeffrey Epsteins, the all of them. And I think one of the things that, as we've been saying, is I lost my train of thought. Is how we're all, what people in our group do reflects on us, but on the other hand, we're all in it together. Whether it's Stephen Miller who's a Nazi but Jewish, or it's somebody else. It implicates all of us and it affects all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We are a little bit over an hour. I hope you guys both have a little bit more time.
I'm off today.
All right. So much to talk about. And one of the things that has been occupying me, as folks who subscribe to the debrief will know, is the Nick Kristof column that came out last week. This, of course, is on the sexual assault of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. after, right after that article, that opinion piece came out in the New York Times, I had Sari Bashi, who is the executive director of the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel, on the debrief. We had a really in-depth discussion. If folks haven't seen that, and this is something that you want to learn more about, the underlying,
Absolutely.
please, please do take the time. When I send out this podcast, I'll be happy to link to that one.
Right.
Please do take the time to check that out. Now, you have the Nick Kristof piece, the underlying facts in terms of the abuse of Palestinian detainees. And then we have the reaction within the Jewish community, which I have found both fascinating as someone who watches these things, and appalling. And I mean, for me, the way that I've kind of thought about it is the last time, for me, I mean, others may see it differently. We had this kind of uh, meltdown within the Jewish community, evidence of what you might see as a schism within the Jewish community. That's something I've spoken with Rabbi Professor Shaul Magid about. The last time I think we saw something like this was over the election of Zoran Mamdani, when the Jews went crazy at each other.
That's not wrong here either.
Right. Yeah. And now I think we're seeing it over the Nick Kristof piece, with some Jews saying, hey, this is good. I mean, it is good that Nick Kristof published this piece and is shining a light on an extremely disturbing phenomenon that we should do something about, right? And then, of course, as folks will know if you've been paying any attention to this, there are voices within the Jewish community who have taken an extremely different approach. Things like accusations of blood libel against Nick Kristof in the New York Times. The Israeli government has indicated that it intends to sue the New York Times. I do not think that they're stupid enough to actually do that, but it's an intimidation tactic. They're saying that they are going to sue the New York Times. There are some Jews who are canceling their subscriptions to the New York Times. There is a rabbi here on Substack, who I don't intend to name, who put out a piece entitled, "This is who Nicholas Kristof is." That's his reaction, is to write a piece defaming Nick Kristof. Folks, jump in.
I'm gonna say one thing. And so I was at a meeting with a bunch of Jewish, well, like 6 Jewish leaders and a bunch of like 30 other religious leaders. And that's when I learned about the Nick Kristof piece, and I skimmed it. And the one thing I want to say, I'm not going to get into all of that you mentioned. It is not hard to believe that in times of war, that people who have power, weapons, guns, whatever, will commit sexual violence, sexual rape, or sexual violence, rape, sodomy, whatever, as part of power. That's what happens in war. And that is a very common tactic. And also, members of our community, this community, the Jewish folks, were really upset that people didn't believe the women's accusations about sexual violence, sexual assault that happened when they were held captive by Hamas or Palestinians or whatever. And some of those same folks, I seem like they don't want to believe the other side. And that's really sad, because we're actually losing the story. We're actually losing the story. The sexual assault happened, and people are reporting it, and still people also deflect. We're talking about other things. And again, I'll say this happens in war. It has always happened. So it is not hard to imagine.
Right. Well, I think extended from it happens in war, it happens when there is one group of people that has power over another. And it is part of the exercise of power, and always has been. And to those who say there needs to be an investigation, there have been many investigations. I have been working, well, there's a long interregnum, but with Palestinian civil society, Palestinian organizations, which now starting 30 years ago, and nothing has changed. So it's not like this is new, right? This is not news. It shouldn't be news because it's only gotten worse. And as a lot of people who are I don't even know how to say this, who are not supportive of the way that Israel is treating Palestinians. I don't even know how to like wrap that up. This is a kind of a question not of kind but of intensity. Like, Israel has been treating those whom they have power over very poorly for as long as they had power. And it's not just Israel, it's not just Jews. Anyone with power does this.
Yeah.
Because that's part of power. And we can say, like, it's not possible for dogs. There's all these little deflections. But I read a piece by a guy who, was in the Israeli army long, I guess, since 67. And we as Jews want to feel like we are better than that. And I think one of the reasons that we feel that we are better than that is because as a diasporic community, we were always on the other side of violence. Usually on the other side of violence. We were usually the recipients of violence, which gave us some sort of moral authority in the collective mind that we do not do that. But Jews as a diasporic community, and Jews as a ruling body of a state are very different communities. And I think, Deborah, you had Omer Bartov on, and that also was a discussion that I think is so important. Is the one is that there are very many multiple truths that are true at the same time, but also that power, political power, geopolitical power, makes people use it.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is that this is solely separate. I'm not trying to say these are similar. Well, I do believe that many in the Jewish community want to believe that we are somehow better, but we're still human beings and we're flawed human beings. And I remember when, shortly when I was in rabbinical school and right after I was ordained, I started writing more about and talking publicly about the experiences of racism that I was experiencing within the Jewish community. And the number of people, either online or in person, that came at me was horrible. Was so much vitriol, so much nastiness, and I'm only right about my own experience. And I think because when my other voices started chiming in, I think that helped a little bit. But they were so adamant that I was lying or so adamant that I was wrong. And one of the tactics to do that was to sort of, well, we know she's a rabbi, so we got to do this differently. So let's just explain how she's not Jewish. And so she's not Jewish, therefore she's not a rabbi, and therefore she doesn't know what she's talking about, which is completely crazy. But I think part of that is to show that people want so hard to believe that we are we are not racist like those folks over there. We're not racist at all, or we don't commit these atrocities like other folks do. And instead of dealing with it, the violence, the vitriol, the attacks, instead of recognizing that human beings that hold power do these horrible things, human beings at war do these horrible things, and so yeah, that's all I got.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate all of that. I want to throw out a few things. One is, if folks have not seen it, and thank you to my husband for catching it and pointing it out to me. The New York Times just published yesterday an official response to the criticism that Nick Kristof's column gotten. So, if folks have not seen that, definitely recommend seeing what Nick Kristof and the New York Times officially have to say, how they're responding to this criticism. Now, I want to address a couple of other things. One is, I did see Thea, and there's a lot of robust stuff going on in the chat. Really appreciate it. Thea writes, "Are we sure this story about dogs is even true?" And let me just jump in on that, because this has gotten a hell of a lot of attention. And I chose, in the discussion that I had with Sari Bashi, to ask her directly about this. God, not because I wanted to bring up the subject of dog rape, and whether what is alleged is actually
Can you
canine.
fill me in? Because I thought I understood. Now I'm not sure I do.
Okay,
They were
so in the piece, Nick
Mhm.
Kristof, for the piece, he interviews 14 Palestinian survivors of sexual assault. And one of them describes being sexually assaulted um, in detention by Israeli prison guards. Um, th- a They have a dog come on top of him. Sorry, trigger warning. Obviously,
Yeah.
trigger
Okay.
warning.
All right.
They have, I mean, this whole section, obviously, trigger warning. Sorry, belated trigger warning.
Yeah.
They have a dog come on top of him. There are many documented cases of dogs being used in Israeli detention in sexual assault. But the
Mhm, mhm.
specific allegation made here is that, with the encouragement of these prison guards, the dog actually penetrates him.
Yeah. Okay.
There has now this is a lot of the blood libel accusations have focused on this specific piece in a long article about sexual assault of Palestinians in Israeli detention. A lot of attention is on the, well, is that even possible? Oh, come on, that and so I asked Sari about this. I definitely recommend. This is the, when I put a clip out onto social media, it was her response to this
Mhm.
that I put out. I think it's really important. And basically, the point is, look, it's been well documented by many organizations that reported on, including her organization, PCADI, the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel. B'Tselem has done multiple reports. The UN has done a report, etc. Right, that sexual abuse is occurring, including rape. That dogs have been used in some of these cases in getting on top of them, humiliating them. And as Sari puts it, I'm paraphrasing here. Like, we could debate the mechanics of that,
All right.
but maybe that's not the best use of our time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the way that we should be handling this. The fact is that with broad brushes, it is very well documented that this horrific abuse is happening. Let's focus on changing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and I couldn't agree with her more. Right? Look, I'll say this. I'll add in this little tidbit. I, of course, had nothing to do with this New York Times piece. If I had been an editor on the opinion staff at the New York Times, I would have thought, I mean, I'm sure they did think very long and hard about including that piece, that tidbit, that that, in the article, I may very well have said, look, let's take that particular detail out. People are going to latch onto that. They're going to freak out about it. And it's just not, we have enough without it, right? It's not worth it. Now, having said that, though, people would have freaked out no matter what. I mean, let's just be clear, right? There would have been a violent reaction within the Jewish community and people going out and picketing outside the New York Times' headquarters with signs alleging blood libel, whether that particular tidbit was in there or not. But it was a perfect opportunity for deflection, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope that is helpful. I had seen your and it's something that had been such a focus that I did want to address it here. And the last thing that I'll just say on this, there's so much we could say, but Stephanie, I appreciate your mentioning Dr. Omer Bartov, who recently published a book called Israel, What Went Wrong. He's been doing a ton of media, and I was pleased to have him on the debrief for a really deep dive conversation. And although obviously he wrote and published this before the Nick Kristof piece, it is really directly, of course, related. I mean, what he really documents in his book brilliantly is the dehumanization of Palestinians within Israeli society that has taken place over decades. Obviously, after October 7th, and the horrific acts that were perpetrated by Hamas and other militants against Israelis that day, the dehumanization, increased on steroids. Omer Bartov talks about how before October 7th, he had been one among, a group of Jews and even Israelis, he's an Israeli American, who warned that the dehumanization of Palestinians in Israeli society was proceeding to such a point, and, the entrenchment and metastasis of the occupation to such a point that he was worried that there would be an event like a major terrorist attack that would lead to a backlash from Israel that would be extremely severe. And of course, that's what happened, to the point that he, as a scholar of Holocaust and genocide studies, over time came to the conclusion that it has reached the level of genocide. Whether you would use that word or not, again, I think is, it's kind of analogous to the dog rape thing. I mean, there are clearly war crimes and atrocities, whether you want to use the word genocide or not. And I mean, that, um, so I just wanted to share that. And the point that I think this is a really important moment for Israelis, for the Jewish diaspora, to really ask ourselves if we are willing to examine and take seriously very painful truths. And what are we willing to do about them? And that's my take.
Often when people ask me, about Israel society, and it moves into this Zionist, anti-Zionist conversation, I say something like, I support people. I support people. I support my Israeli friends, the families that took care of me when I lived there. But I don't support any state the way that some in the Jewish community expect us to not be critical of the state of Israel, but it's okay to be critical of the U.S. government. So it's sad. Like I told y'all beforehand that I skimmed the article on the plane because I missed the dog. I saw dogs. I do remember seeing dogs, and I was like, okay, they're using dog, and I just it's like maybe my brain was trying to protect me from that. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I will say, my experience of reading that piece, as someone, I mean, to be clear, as someone for whom it was, the underlying facts were not a surprise,
Yeah.
that the sexual abuse is rampant, and particularly since October 7th, but not exclusively since October 7th, it was still an absolute gut punch to read that. I mean, it was just heart-wrenching. I will wrap it up here, and I'm so glad that we've got so many folks with us for this awesome conversation among badass Jewish women. There is one thing that I see in the chat, and thank you for all these great comments and questions in the chat. There is one thing that I just uh, Gabrielle remarks on in the chat, and others may have been thinking as well. When I use the word genocide, Gabrielle reacted, "Why wouldn't we use the word genocide? It's a painful truth." Let me just say, first of all, because this is another huge flashpoint within the Jewish community, right? The use of the word genocide. Look, let's make clear, genocide is a legal term, right? There is a legal
Yeah.
definition in, the post World War II genocide convention that was inspired by Raphael Lemkin. This is something that obviously Omer Bartov and I go into in our conversation. And, you know, it's not a question about like whether you in your gut feel like it's genocide or not. Like it is a specific legal question. There's a legal definition. You compare the facts against the legal definition, right? For experts like Omer Bartov, who study not only the Holocaust but other genocides, he has done that and concluded at some point, after the Israeli destruction of Rafah in Gaza, concluded that it was a genocide. I had another conversation here on the debrief with one of my favorite people in the entire world, Michael Sfard, who is one of the foremost Israeli human rights lawyers and an amazing, brilliant person. And he went into a deep dive on, the legalities of the Genocide Convention, how it's actually litigated. If you want to get into all of that, there are plenty of resources here for you on the debrief. But the point that I would make, is whether you as an independent scholar and sleuth, look at the law and the facts and you come to whatever conclusion you come to. I think the key point is, and I think there's perfectly good reason, certainly, someone like Omer Bartov, for whom I have extraordinary respect as a scholar, concludes that it's genocide. And that is an absolutely reasonable position to take. But at the end of the day, my view is, let's not twist ourselves into pretzels over whether or not it's genocide. The fact is that, whether you think it rises to the level of genocide or not, there are war crimes that are just as severe and require accountability under international law that have clearly been transgressed. Let's deal with that.
I also think that, like, for your, yes, it's a legal term, and there might be some legality around the word apartheid, but your average person, words live in the system, in the ecosystem, and when they're looking for words to describe things that they see, they will gravitate to words that they know. So it might be apartheid, it might be genocide, it might be something else. And then the deflection of that's a legal term, doesn't fit that. Your average person doesn't care. Like, it is like, give me another word. Like, how do I but that's just the part. And I think sometimes tearing people up because they use words they know and they understand without providing the other education sometimes, and demeaning people because they might say apartheid, might say genocide, and any other words that are going out there, because people are people and they're using the words that they recognize, that they've heard, and don't care if the word belongs. Like, even the word concentration camp, for a while, people are upset. You're upset. Like, that's our word. Like, no, it's
Yeah.
It's a word with a definition that.
Right. And like, I'm just kind of tired of like beating people up because they use certain words in their descriptions of what they see or what they've witnessed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
I totally
Please.
agree. No, I think that those are really important points. And, whether you're going to call it genocide or catastrophe or just horrifying situation. I mean, like, it's a horrifying situation. 1 million kids are now homeless or without parents. Like,
Yeah.
it's bad. So we need to look it in the eye and talk about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, this has been an amazing conversation. And I am so grateful to Dr. Stephanie Wilson and Rabbi Sandr Lawson for joining me here on the debrief as we wrap up.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Wait. Thank you, Debra, for hosting.
Well, no, as we wrap up, I'm not, first of all, I want to just ask you guys, anyone who is here as a subscriber to the debrief who doesn't know the two of you, could you please let folks know how they can find you and follow you?
Yeah, so I have a Substack. It's Rabbi Sandra, that Substack. In fact, you can find me anywhere on the internet is Rabbi Sandra. So, and I write about contemporary issues and often with a Jewish framing or Jewish lens. And I write about Jewish stuff too.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I have a podcast called Freedom Over Fascism. So you can find me at freedomoverfascism.us, which takes you to my Substack. I also talk about chronic illness and mostly I don't talk about Jewish or Israel-Palestine things because I'm really focused on the United States and the fight for freedom and democracy. But I have a lot of really great interviews that can talk about things like the radicalization of young men and how that happens and why that happens. And so I have had a lot of conversations in there that might be very interesting to take a look at or listen to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you both do incredible work. You are such important voices, including as badass Jewish women, representing our community beautifully. And I'm so grateful for both of you. Folks, if you subscribe to the debrief, you can be certain that you will get the video recording of this conversation in your inbox. Highly recommend and hope that everyone will subscribe to the three of us here on Substack. I hope you'll share this video with folks that you think might be interested. And of course, we could all use your support. And so if you are able to become a paid subscriber, that is just absolutely awesome. We could all use your support. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We've got almost 200 people who have joined us.
Yeah.
Made the conversation.
It stuck around.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's do it again, ladies, right? All right.
Absolutely. Totally. Thank you, Debra, for
Thank you.
bringing us together.
It's my pleasure. All right. Happy holiday. Chag Sameach. Happy Shavuot. And also Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Love you all. Bye.
Love you. Bye.